Well, hello and good evening. I'm Don Arleth and welcome to Flash News. The war is over. America's longest war has finally come to an end. Last night, the last plane with soldiers from the 82nd Airborne Division departed from Kabul. After 20 years, there's not a single American soldier left in Afghanistan. However, there are still American citizens and associates of coalition forces who have not been able to get to the airport after 2 weeks of dramatic evacuation efforts.
These are the first reactions to the news of the last American plane taking off from Kabul airport. A C-17 Boeing took off from the ground just after 2 p.m. Polish time with soldiers and diplomats on board, including the American ambassador to Afghanistan. The last soldier to board was the commander of the 82nd Airborne Division. We have a message for anyone looking at Afghanistan with bad intentions who dares to invade us. You will face what the United States has faced. The Americans have left helicopters, planes and tons of equipment at the airfield that they claim is no longer fit for anything. But in addition to the equipment, several hundred Americans and several thousand Afghans who worked with them during the war are also left in Afghanistan.
We believe there are still a small number of Americans, under 200 and likely closer to 100, who remain in Afghanistan and want to leave. We're trying to determine exactly how many. In
total, more than 120,000 people have been evacuated from Afghanistan. Several dozen countries took part in the action, including Poland. Our Air Force rescued over 1,300 Afghans, Poles and citizens of other NATO countries using a special corridor through Uzbekistan. For a week, our diplomats and soldiers searched through the crowd of desperate people. They conducted an evacuation operation in an extremely efficient and extremely responsible manner in Afghanistan at the Kabul airport, which is a success of soldiers and diplomats of the Republic of Poland. The war in Afghanistan was the longest conflict in which America has participated. Less than 20 years ago, Al-Qaeda terrorists attacked the United States. A month later, America struck back.
It's not a mission of war, but a mission of mercy. This is how President Biden described the evacuation of U.S. troops, citizens, and those who assisted U.S. forces from Afghanistan. He added that no other country had the capability or the will to conduct such a mission on a massive scale.
Last night in Kabul, the United States ended 20 years of war in Afghanistan, the longest war in American history. We completed one of the biggest airlifts in history, with more than 120,000 people evacuated to safety. That number is more than double what most experts thought were possible. No nation has ever done anything like it in all of history. Only the United States had the capacity and the will and ability to do it, and we did it today. The extraordinary success of this mission was due to the incredible skill, bravery, and selfless courage of the United States military and our diplomats and intelligence professionals. For weeks, they risked their lives to get American citizens, Afghans who helped us, citizens of our allies and partners and others on board planes and out of the country. And they did it facing a crush of enormous crowds seeking to leave the country. And they did it knowing ISIS-K terrorists, sworn enemies of the Taliban, were lurking in the midst of those crowds. And still, the women and men of the United States military, our diplomatic corps, and intelligence professionals did their job and did it well, risking their lives, not for professional gains, but to serve others.
After the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan, words of criticism are being heard about how the evacuation proceeded, and especially about the fact that a large group of American citizens was left behind.
Symbolic funerals of Western empires are how the Taliban celebrate on the streets of Afghan cities. At the same time, on the streets of Washington, real mourning. Mr. Orhun fled Kabul from the Red Army. He and Mrs. Catherine live in America. They both can't believe what happened in the last days. An American soldier stands next to a Taliban and look into each other's eyes. It's hard to understand and go through it lighthearted, even if you are so far away.
Biden actually brought Taliban, so they all together. Biden, Taliban, is all together.
Judgments and assumptions very hard, but as desperate Afghans say, through politicians' mistakes, they have lost their country, and worst of all, it has not been possible to evacuate all those willing. There are still Americans on the ground. Just a few days ago, President Joe Biden assured that the soldiers would stay until the last American left the country. Now the lives of these men are in the hands of the Taliban, who, thanks to the arsenal seized from the Afghan and American armies, are a major power in the region.
Jihad is won and democracy is lost. That's shameful. And that is going to make America less safe and get future American soldiers killed that have to go back to deal with this mess.
Only 6% of Americans believe the war has been won. Republicans want President Joe Biden to step down and will demand an explanation.
For the administration to tell us what weaponry was left, what's the plan to get Americans home safely.
According to Professor James Robbins, the final weeks of the Afghanistan mission have etched a big crack in Joe Biden's image.
He came into office saying he was a contrast to President Trump, that he was competent, that he was experienced, and now he's completely blown his pullout from Afghanistan, which could have been orderly and left a government that survived. Instead, it was a complete disaster.
A disaster is what some in the media are calling the president's behavior at a ceremony welcoming back to the country the 13 soldiers killed in last week's attack in Kabul. Joe Biden couldn't help but glance at his watch during the ceremony. The New York Post front page described it in a word: a disgrace.
The government is increasing the security of the eastern border of Poland and the European Union. The Council of Ministers has asked President Andrzej Duda to impose a state of emergency for 30 days on a narrow strip of land near the border. This means that the frontier will not be approached by random people, but only by government authorities. The same regulations have already been introduced in Lithuania and Latvia.
Imposing a state of emergency for a month in a narrow border strip will greatly increase the ability to defend Poland's eastern border to the European Union and NATO. We have an increased pressure on the Polish border. This border is being strengthened, defense is being built. We will continue to strengthen the security. The resolution of the government assumes the introduction of this one of 3 states of emergency on the territory of more than 180 localities in Lubelski and Podlaski provinces. I want to reassure the residents of the border towns that this will not in the slightest interfere in your professional life and the possibility of running business activity or agricultural activity in these areas. The introduction of a state of emergency at the border means, among other things, the inability to hold gatherings and mass events there, as well as restricting the ability of people who do not live there permanently to enter the area. This will allow us to better ensure the quality of the integrity of our border and simply prevent these aggressive actions, these provocations. If we illegally allow this group of refugees into our country, we will have not one Usnash but many such cases around the border. The government has decided to impose a state of emergency in the wake of such actions, among others. This is a group of several activists who destroyed the entanglements on the border with Belarus. The saboteurs were charged. The state of emergency is a reaction to the Russian maneuver Zapad 21, which will start soon. Officially, 200,000 soldiers will take part in them. Several thousand soldiers are expected to take part in the Belarusian episodes, which will be held near the Polish border.
Now let's move on to California, where a mandatory evacuation of the town of South Lake Tahoe is underway. The reason is the Caldor fire, which continues to spread. In the meantime, firefighters are trying to contain another forest fire on the opposite side of the lake.
Yeah, it's more out of control than I thought, and I can't believe that California is going to just let the jewel just burn up. I don't know. I don't see any planes and I don't see any helicopters.
More than 2,500 firefighters are battling the fire, backed by firefighting planes. As of Monday, the fire was just 14% contained, with nearly 90 fires raging across the western United States. South Lake Tahoe's main hospital had already evacuated critical care patients and patients in the intensive care unit on Sunday. The remaining patients and staff were evacuated on Monday. On the other hand, some city residents were forced to evacuate earlier due to the thick smoke. It also caused the closure of schools, restaurants and stores.
There have been 285 new coronavirus infections reported in the past 24 hours, and students will begin a new school year tomorrow. They will return to the classrooms for stationary learning, and about 20% of children ages 12 and up are vaccinated. But there will be more opportunities to do so as kids go back to school.
Classes will take place under a sanitary regime. School year new, but rules old. That's distance, disinfection and masks. Students will also have separate entrances to school described. This is to avoid excessive crowding. To make it even safer, a vaccination campaign for students and their parents will soon be launched at schools. As September comes, the number of social interactions that carry the potential transmission of the virus increases, which makes this probability of developing an epidemic even higher. A large group of those vaccinated are prisoners. The vaccine was taken by 81% of them. Prison service officers, especially diligent in the fight against the pandemic, received decorations today. For those actions that went far beyond the scope of normal everyday duties, where you volunteered to go to those difficult places and accomplish those not easy tasks. Correctional officers, among other things, worked in temporary hospitals, organized mask-sewing campaigns, and donated plasma.
This is how solidarity was born. 41 years ago, representatives of striking workers on the Baltic coast signed an agreement with the communists that ended the strikes. Celebrations of the anniversary were held today in Gdansk and other Polish cities.
The courage and determination of the Polish workers made it possible to break the communists. After many days of strike at the Gdańsk shipyard and 700 workplaces joining solidarity protests, a historic agreement was signed. These September agreements gave the Polish people a chance to become independent from the power imposed by Moscow after World War II from the communists. During the ceremony, the memory of the participants of those events was recalled. In Warsaw, at the monument at Warsaw Steelworks, President Andrzej Duda paid tribute to the workers of August. They demanded what every man deserves, which is simply freedom, and they obtained its important element. The main celebrations were held in the historic BHP Hall of the Gdańsk shipyard. On behalf of the Polish president, the president of the Institute of National Remembrance presented the Cross of Freedom and Solidarity and Knight's Cross of the Order of Polonia Restituta. We managed to do a lot of good for Poland, said Jerzy Grzywacz, who was accompanied by his 5-year-old son during the strike. He was probably the youngest citizen on strike at that shipyard. In Gdańsk, there was no lack of references to the current political situation. Strong words about Jarosław Gowin came from Solidarity chairman Piotr Duda. I'll say it straight as a trade unionist because I can. It's good that there is no longer this pest in the United Rights government. ISGTU Solidarity scholarships were also presented. Authorities laid flowers at the historic Gdańsk shipyard gate. We know today that these 21 demands were not engraved in stone, but first and foremost in our hearts. A solemn Holy Mass was celebrated at St. Bridget's Basilica. Earlier at Solidarity Square, the Institute of National Remembrance open-air exhibition Solidarity Was Born Here was opened.
They set off to remind the world about the achievements of Polish Himalayan climbers. The team, which 10 days ago set off from Jelenia Góra in an old-school Jelcz truck to the Himalayas, is already in Turkey. And we know about this thanks to the old-school Polish communication system.
They have been driving like this for 10 days. Although it's only the beginning, it hasn't been without technical problems. At night, 3.5 hours sleeping, in the morning disassembling the gearbox, that's how it runs here. We go primarily to talk about the history of climbing. And there is much to talk about. The golden age of Himalayan climbing was in the 70s and 80s when the Poles became the first conquerors of 8,000ers in winter time. The participants of this year's With a Jelcz to the Himalayas expedition are driving exactly the same truck as our Himalayan climbers did 4 decades ago. We know that they are now in Turkey thanks to the modern Polish communication system. Communication with the participants is done by the PIK system, which is a completely Polish construction and solution. This is the first conference using the communication integration platform. What are your impressions of the tour? There are adventures, but very positive, and even if there are some unpleasant ones, they are momentarily resolved. Meet a lot of supporters, nice people every day on the road. If everything goes according to plan, the team will reach Nepal in mid-September.
The Jordan River is to Israel and Jordan as the Nile is to Egypt. It is the source of priceless fresh water in desert areas. With growth in intensive agriculture, the Jordan River is running out of water. Therefore, the countries bordering it are making joint efforts to revive the biblical river.
Jordan is a river of special importance to Christians. It is in it that Jesus was baptized. It flows through Lebanon, Syria, Israel, and Jordan. In recent years, the demand for water from the Jordan River has been increasing as the region's population grows. The area of irrigated crops is also increasing. The riverbed is starting to run out of water. Hence the agreement between Israel and Jordan. Both countries are working on a project to distribute desalinated seawater. Israel has advanced technology in this field, and Jordan would provide energy from the sun. Turns cardboard packaging into slightly more sophisticated shapes. Japanese artist Monami Ono has been making sculptures out of cardboard boxes for 10 years. First, she creates a sketch and then precisely cuts pieces of cardboard. So far, she has made over 200 works. She does not need much, just unlimited imagination, glue, scissors, paper, and manual skills. Some of her works are made to order. They reach a price of over 50,000 zloty, although she also makes cheaper ones. In the human population, they are a minority, but here they dominate. Red-haired people from all over the world came to Tilburg in the Netherlands. They came from the UK, USA, Germany, Hungary, Egypt, Denmark, and Belgium, among others. Although they live in distant places, they feel a special bond. Worldwide, red hair is found in between 1 and 2% of the population. In the city of Krgvenica in Croatia, dogs with their owners said goodbye to summer, and it was an active farewell. First, there was a short run along the waterfront, and then they jumped into the water and covered a distance of about 100 meters. Half of the competitors swam in a doggy style, the rest in freestyle. 13 duos took part in the competition. The winners were Antonia Perker and Nando, a dog taken in by Antonia from a local shelter 1.5 years ago.
And with that six-legged race, we conclude the program. Marcin Pszasnik's back tomorrow. Thanks for watching, everybody, and enjoy what's left of your evening. Good night.